It's time for Talkward, Cringeworthy Tales. And now, your host, weekly humorist, editor-in-chief, Marty Dundix.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Talkward. I'm Marty Dundix, editor-in-chief of Weekly Humorist Magazine, and this is Talkward, a fun little podcast where professionally funny people come to tell awkward and cringeworthy stories. And I have two guests today that I'm so excited about. And one I have known incredibly so long that it makes me sad to think about how long I've known him, because it just makes me feel so old. And then the other I've met a few times, and we're going to get to know her more now. But they have a new show out on PBS Kids called City Island, and it's Aaron Augenblick and Katie Wendt. And thank you so much for being on Talkward today. Thank you, and hello from are you guys over at Augenblick Studios?
We are here at the studio in Brooklyn, New York, in Dumbo.
Out in Dumbo, and you've been in Dumbo forever.
Yeah,
like
we have literally forever.
The evolution
of time.
The evolution of Augenblick Studios. You've had multiple studios. I've seen different iterations of Augenblick Studios growing and growing and growing over the years.
The question is, who has been in Brooklyn longer? Was it us, Augenblick Studios in Dumbo, or was it you in that Park Slope apartment? Because it's been a really long time. I think you were in the very first brownstone they ever built in New York.
2002.
Wow. Incredible.
And Augenblick Studios has been in Dumbo at least since 2004, but definitely 2003, right?
1999.
1999. Oh, you guys have beat me by a
Actually,
ton.
we're the last gasp of the 90s was the building of our studio. And we've been in Dumbo. We opened our studio here in 1999, shortly after I worked at MTV. And when we came here to Dumbo, there was nothing around. It was just warehouses, and
desolate.
Happily, one of the first artists to flood into Brooklyn. And this is even before Williamsburg was really a thing. We've been here like within a 3-block radius ever since. You were right. We've had 4 different locations in Dumbo, but always in Dumbo, and it's been great.
I remember one of the first, I think it was the first studio space, and there was a big, huge poster from the old school. This is one of your original reels. This is
look at that.
I got a couple of these.
I'm not familiar with that media. What is that? Is that a record?
This is a DVD, and this is sealed. Like, this is actually one of the sealed ones.
What?
I had a couple of these.
That's worth a lot. That's worth millions of dollars.
This has your independent demo reel from Drunky, Ramblin' Man, Plugs McGinnis,
wow,
The Dignified
really
Devil. This is 2004. Augenblick
Yeah.
Studios from 45 Main Street. 521.
Wow, that was actually the second space that we had. That was the second space. That was the one we built to make the show Shorties Watching Shorties on Comedy Central.
That's right. Shorties
to loop
Watching
it into
Shorties.
the comedy theme. So Marty, are we going to have to tell awkward stories, or are we going to talk about City Island?
You're supposed to
Or is
tell
it
an awkward story.
about making City Island.
What always happens, though, is inadvertently we will stumble upon some sort of a situation that's an awkward story with any of the comedy people I talk to. So rarely do people actually have to prepare any sort of storytelling situation. Your studio has put together so many wonderful shows that I've watched through the years, and I've been lucky enough to know you, to get to kind of see things grow. I remember going to the Shorties Watching Shorties a watch party in Dumbo.
Wow.
That's how old I am. And Ugly Americans. I was a huge fan of Ugly Americans.
That party was actually the Shorties Watching Shorties premiere party, and also Katie's first birthday.
Yeah.
She was born.
I was a Shorties Watching Shorties.
Really? That's right.
On Comedy Central when I was in high school, I want to say.
Very cool.
But I was very precocious. I was 2 years old.
We have a big demographic with 2-year-olds that like to watch late night stand-up comedy starring Nick DiPaolo.
So with the brand new show, City Island, which I love and I've watched multiple episodes of. So you've done an entire career of adult animation, and there's been such a resurgence of adult animation, probably driven by Augenblick Studios. You guys have just been doing it forever. Other people have been doing it later on. It became much more popular. Everyone sees the advantages of adult animated comedy shows, especially during COVID. Everything became much more easier to produce when you didn't actually have to shoot things with human beings, and you could just record voices. And your whole career is doing much more adult branded humor. And now you're launching with the Future Brain, which is the new animation company that specializes in children entertainment. And this new show, City Island, is it kind of a full circle where you were influenced by cartoons as a kid, and then you go as an adult and you make this great animation studio, and you're making all these things for Comedy Central and for Netflix and for Adult Swim, and now you're kind of going back in and you're like, remember what influenced me as a kid? It was these moral-based, still funny and interesting animated shows. I
Yeah.
want those to be made for kids to watch now.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a good observation. I mean, I think there's a couple things. One, I do think I've always been a bit of a contrarian, and in the early days of my career, it was very hard to find adult animation. Most of the animation that was out there was kids stuff, and I was really influenced by underground comics and movies and things like that. And I was really interested in taking the things that I thought was really funny, that I grew up on, things like the Coen brothers and David Lynch and Robert Crumb and all those kind of cartoons, and inflicting them on animation. So that was the impetus of my studio, was that we were really focused on adult animation at a time that not too many places were focused primarily on it. Some people did it on the side, but we were really focused on it. And at the time, everyone said that we were pretty crazy. And we were, doing adult animation early time, and we were there for the beginning days of Adult Swim and some primetime cartoons on Comedy Central. And it's been a lot of fun, and I love doing it. I still love doing it. And then I think that now we're at a point where there's a lot of adult animation out there, especially with the streaming services. There's like tons of adult animation. And I started seeing some of the more interesting things happening in the kids space, that I thought some of the more daring things, the more exciting things, were actually happening in the kids space. And that was, a few years ago. But myself and Dan Powell, who's my partner at Future Brain, we both sort of simultaneously, because he does a lot of adult things as well. He's the showrunner of the Amy Schumer Show, and he's the producer of I Think You Should Leave, and a lot of shows like that. And we met on Ugly Americans, a show that we did for Comedy Central. And both of us were like, oh, there's all this cool stuff happening in the kids space. At least we should do that too. Let's try to, make some kids animation together. So that was how we formed Future Brain. So sort of a combination of, there's something I haven't really tried enough of in my career. Also, there's a really good time for kids animation. And then, like you said, so many of my influences were those actually morally responsible animated shows like Sesame Street, Pee-wee's Playhouse, like all these kind of cool, interesting, but yet sincere shows. And it was like at this time, the studio's been open for over 2 decades. It seemed really exciting to try to do a show that was a little more direct and a little more sincere. It didn't need to be sort of parodying everything, but actually doing things in a more direct way, that it could be sort of an educational show, but also be as funny as our other shows.
That was another comment that I had about City Island is it's too short. I need you to make a half an hour version. Okay. I need a 30-minute version of this show, because this show is so good that the second I get into it, it's over and I'm like, and then you got to watch another one. But it has such a saturation of punchy jokes. It is so joke heavy and clever in that it's 3 minutes, 4 minutes long.
3, yeah.
It is got so much going on in just a couple of minutes. Like, I was watching the one where they go to the airport and they're going to Movieland, Movieville. And they're going to Movieville, and it's so funny. And so for people watching and listening, you got to watch City Island. Everything in the world is alive. So every piece of equipment, the keys have faces and voices, and the ticket scanner is the person scanning your ticket, and she's talking, and the bus is alive, and everything's alive.
Yeah.
So everything's alive and everything's talking, and it's wonderful, and it's like there's a comedic density, I think is the term I've heard before, where there's so much content and there's so much rich creativity in one image. Though just so much stuff is happening. And it's only in 3 minutes, and it's fascinating how much you guys can put into, and I think that goes a lot to the direction for each episode. And Katie, you're the director of all these episodes. You're the animation director.
Yeah, I'm the animation director, and I got to help I got to be in the writer's room, which is always exciting as an
Yeah.
animator.
And you guys, and Aaron, you created the show, so you're not
Yeah.
just being the studio animating. Because there's a big difference between being the G studio that's animating the show that someone else is giving you
Sure.
versus being the show that you are making. Because you're kind of driving creatively everything about the show. So
Yeah, we do both. We do both. We do, collaborations with creators and writers that come to us when it's the right fit for us. We're definitely, a boutique studio. We're choosy about what we do. And we also develop our own shows. And City Island is a great example of that. And, when I was saying that, I had started Future Brain a few years ago with Dan Powell, one of the first things we did was get a very small room of our very favorite creators and just talk about cartoons and kids' cartoons. And one of those few people was Katie. So it was like me and Katie and Dan and our friend Devin. And we sat in a room and just brainstormed about like, what is, what are your favorite cartoons? What is the cartoon you've always wanted to see, but you never did? Or the cartoon you always wanted to, work on and you never got to work on it. And, that was like a roundtable discussion where we just talked about cartoons. And one of the ideas that came from that was City Island. We brainstormed the idea of City Island. So I did create City Island, but then Katie has been along from the very beginning. She was there from when we created the idea all the way through development. And then it's important to me to have the animation director be directly involved in the writing, which is actually rare in animation. They usually try to keep writers and animators sequestered. They don't like to mix for whatever reason in most mainstream animation.
They chase us
And
out with squirt bottles.
they squirt you
Yeah.
like a cat and you run away. So to me, it was like this is a comedy podcast, Marty. So like, I'll point out that like it used to be flipped. The animation world pre-Simpsons was very like animator and director heavy. Something like you look at like the Looney Tunes. You see like it's very animator driven comedy. And then James L. Brooks, who was the producer of The Simpsons and had come like fresh off of Taxi, his whole thing was like, oh, the writers should be the star of any TV show, whether it's animation or not. So then he was the first one to say, oh, the writers are in charge of everything on animated shows. And the animators they just take care of like the visual stuff, right? And that kind of defined the way that they make most comedy animation for the past 30 years. So we're sort of flipping that back a little bit. We love writers too. I love writers. But to me, it's really cool to actually have everyone together.
Yeah.
And that's why it's been important. Katie's been in every single writer's room and does drafts on scripts and notes and all of that. So we try to keep everything to like creatively working together.
Because the animators, the artists, and they're visual communication. They're visual humor communicators. So they're going to have ideas about, it would be funny if we drew this way, or it'd be funny if visually this cue happens, and it's not even something that would be written. It's not something audible. It's something that would be a sight gag that a writer may not think of because they're not an animator. Like, they're not an artist. They're not going to see that. There's so much in old Looney Tunes that's complete sight gags or references or just like the smallest little joke that's almost a throwaway, that's just like a funny reference that maybe as a kid, like I would get it because I was like a nerd, and I'd be like, oh, that's a reference to like a 1950s blah 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 blah. Like they would throw crazy things in Looney Tunes so fast, and there's so many small little things in City Island that I thought were just so fun. And like the episode where they're going to Movieville, everybody used to be an actor. Oh, you might have seen me in, and I love that the running gag qualityness of the show. It is a very professional comedy level writing. Yeah, but it's a PBS kids show. But the jokes aren't dumb, right? Yeah. So I'm really, they're very smart humor, which is great to give to kids. Like kids. As I get older, I see what I had as a kid was, so it was like Looney Tunes, like old school, like Bugs Bunny and the Tex Avery and like all this stuff that was really, really advanced. Yeah. And it was kind of written for adults, but it was kids shows. And then stuff today, is not driven, at least they're not driven also morally. Like a lot of these cartoons and stuff, they don't have that sort of Mr. Rogers, Sesame Street type, this is how you be a good human being. Also, this is an entertaining show. They're kind of missing some of that. And this is really a great thing for kids to watch because it's really punchy, it's fast, it teaches stuff, and it's got little hidden gags that I think like not all kids are going to get, but the smart ones or like the nerdy ones will pick up on, like Frank Lloyd Light.
Yeah. Yeah.
Come on, that's good stuff. That's amazing. He's an architect and he's a lamp, and his name is Frank Lloyd Light. It's great, and his kid is Y.
I had someone that will remain nameless, a younger person, approach me and say, "Hey, I saw your cartoon. I love Frank Lloyd Wright. You're not going to believe this. There's an architect named Frank Lloyd Wright." And I go, "Well, yeah, that's it was a joke."
Joke.
But I mean, honestly, maybe we may live in a world where we do. I think live in a world where there's going to be little kids that's the first time they hear of Frank Lloyd Wright, and that's cool.
Yeah, media like that is exciting because when I watched a bunch of stuff with my dad when I was a kid, and he was really good about like explaining jokes like that to me.
Yeah.
And honestly, like the concept that we were making a show that like made adults laugh because we wanted to make something that made us laugh also kind of comes from the fact that like I watched stuff that was honestly kind of way above my pay grade as a kid, and like I thought it was funny. Like it's kids can handle adult funny things, and all you have to do really is like not too much nudity or swearing, and then kids can watch
Not
it.
too
Like,
much.
yeah, right? I know.
Or none.
Yeah.
Yeah, how
Shockingly little nudity in PBS kids shows these days. No.
well, you get to deal with inanimate objects who are alive, so it's like they're not wearing clothes. A lot of them aren't wearing clothes anyway. Like they're wearing glasses,
True.
which is like clothes, but like
we've had some episodes where characters put on T-shirts, and it's like, does that
feels
mean
weird.
they weren't wearing any clothes before now? It's
Now
the
it feels like
Donald Duck
they're
Mickey Mouse issue.
pantless. Yeah.
So how is the transition from doing a Adult Swim type humor, which have some like maybe like shocking or just like very adult driven jokes, to changing gears? Has it been an easy gear change, and has it been kind of a relief to like not have to do more adult humor? Like sometimes just doing simple jokes that are just funny, it's easier just to be funny than it is to be like shocking and funny.
Sure. Sometimes we say working for the forces of good and not evil.
Yeah, I have used the phrase "it's like a shower for my soul."
Like I'll say this, Marty. It's like I think it's been a smoother transition than people envision because of the fact that we have done a good amount of animated shows at this point, and we learn early on that like every show is different. Even though it's funny, we get like two complaints whenever we put out a new show. Half the people say, this looks totally different. I wish you should make more Super Jail or make another Ugly Americans. This sucks. Or they go, oh, it looks exactly the same as the last thing. This looks exactly like Ugly Americans again. So some people say we're too consistent, and some people say we're too erratic. I try to see a persistence of vision with the projects that we do, but as much as I have through lines, because there's certain kinds of comedy and animation influences that sort of the whole studio sort of shares. You do have to treat every show as its own thing, and every time we start a new show, we do have to sort of reset and decide like, oh, what were we doing last time that will work this time, and what were we doing last time that won't work at all, and we need to do completely differently. And that just comes from the repetition of doing different projects for different creators, for different venues, for different networks. You know what I mean? So in this one, like Katie said, it was like, we approached it like any comedy we've ever made, which was to be as funny, entertaining, and visually stimulating as we possibly can be. We do that on every single show. This one just happened to, not have anything above a G rating, but that doesn't mean you still can't be funny, because there's hilariously funny things that are G rated. Early on, we dove into watching early Sesame Street, which is unbelievably hilarious. I will always love Peanuts. I think Peanuts is just ridiculously funny and works in a perfect zone of being kid friendly, but also really deep in its own way, both emotionally and thematically. So, it was all about like, okay, how can we be funny for City Island World, where it is a very innocent world. It's a very positive world. There's not a lot of, sarcasm or nihilism that you see in our other shows. So, this one, it's just, there's a tone. And I think that, we were very aware of like fitting that tone all along the way, from the writing to the designing to the animation.
And when you make a show, and when you first start out, and then when you develop episodes and stuff, you start with like a show Bible, right? So you kind of figure out what the show is, who the characters are, what the tone is, what the world is. So what's the process like that? Like when you made this show, how long did that kind of thing take? What was an early idea that didn't stay? And that kind of stuff. Like, what were some early iterations or ideas that didn't stick, and then you kind of worked down, and then the stuff that was the best stuff stayed, and then you worked on the rest of the characters. And is this season over, and is there a next season? And where do you see the future of City Island?
Katie, I'm trying to
movie?
think the way I would love to do everything. I love City Island. I had a meeting with PBS yesterday. I was like, anything you want to do, I want to do. We're talking about games, more episodes. I could do this show forever. I enjoy it a lot. Katie, what were like in development? What were some of the things that evolved along the way?
I'm trying to think of like what developed exactly. I mean,
was it always Watt? Was he always a light bulb?
Yeah.
Watt was always the central character. I think we kind of there was a lot of back and forth on like, well, is Watt the main character? Is Watt are Watt and Wendy a duo? I think ultimately we decided that Watt was kind of like the linchpin, like main character. He's in every episode. It's all kind of from his perspective. There are honestly very few shots that Watt isn't in.
Yeah, it's true.
There's basically no scenes Watt isn't in. I weirdly think of The Big Lebowski as like a guide on that, but a lot of the time is like he's in every scene and every shot, almost every shot, but every scene for sure.
I think in early development, Marty was with Watt was like in the early stage of this the show, we thought Watt would like be a little smarter than he ended up. Like I had this idea that he was a light bulb and he was like the smartest kid in town. There was like an Encyclopedia Brown aspect to it.
Yeah.
Where like people girlsy too.
Love
like,
Encyclopedia Brown.
Yeah.
That's a show that could use a reboot. I used to just devour those books.
We should have a character called like Encyclopedia Beige.
Well, there was an episode.
He's an encyclopedia.
Katie,
really
look at these jokes. The jokes are so good.
It's really funny. But
there's an episode. There's an episode from the City Island where they have a mystery to solve, and it was that letter, right?
Yeah, Posty.
That was a great episode.
Our talented writer and performer Rachel Winitsky. She wrote that episode, and when we were doing table reads, which is another good point, Marty, since you're a comedy podcast, is we even did table reads, which a lot of kids shows don't do. You know what I mean? Like we try to approach a super comedy driven, and like we'd write the scripts, we'd all get together, read them together, laugh, punch up jokes. Like it was like very comedy forward. But Rachel was reading her script and she did this hilarious voice for Posty, this like, 50s, 60s, Billy Wilder era, dame. And it was just so funny that we ended up having her do it on the show. But so on the Encyclopedia Brown thing, so I had envisioned like, oh, it'd be really funny if there's like Watt's the smartest kid in town and everyone goes to him to solve all their problems, and we were developing with PBS and it was kind of bumping them. They're like, oh, we're not really we don't really get Watt. We don't find him that likable. And I was like, oh, well, he's like Encyclopedia Brown. Do you know the show Encyclopedia Brown? And they're like, oh yeah, we know that show. We hate Encyclopedia. They're like, we don't like it. You're like, kids, what's exciting about kids is they don't know anything yet and they're learning and the world is new to them. So to have a know-it-all kid that already knows everything, it's sort of skipping the most exciting part for them as far as making an educational show. So early on, I was like, oh, well, wouldn't it be funny then if Watt was just as excited and ambitious of a kid, but he had no idea what he was doing. And then it was like, oh, it immediately then became more endearing and then funnier.
Watt has like he's turned we almost like swung too far the other way, we were finding, where suddenly every episode started hinging on Watt having an insane misconception about something. So we kind of had to like pull
Be
that back a
careful.
little bit too, where it's just like, and then honestly, I feel like we kind of landed on a sweet spot where like Watt just has tons of curiosity and questions,
Yeah,
which
curiosity is
leads to
good.
figuring stuff out.
We
And
don't
is
want him
a
to
lot
be
less grating.
too much of a dim bulb. See, I got jokes. We have a comment. We have a comment from the big board here that's not spam. How was working with the voice actors on City Island? How was working with the voice actors? So, how did you find the voice actors for City Island? Do you just pull from people that you know? And sometimes it's writers that just do a funny voice in the room?
Yeah. It was a combination of both. It was a combination of uh, uh, voiceover comedians that we worked with before. People like James Adomian was somebody that we just always sort of, he's so incredible that
Yeah,
we
Domian's
tend to work with him on
fantastic.
everything. Like I mentioned, Rachel Winitsky is one of our writers. We've known her for a little while. James III was somebody who I've worked with and cast on the show. But the two leads,
Branson, too.
Branson Reese
Yeah.
is a comedy phenomenon, and you should
Frank.
definitely have Branson on this show, Marty. Branson is brilliant and hilariously funny. He does a comic called Swan Boy that we also adapted into an animated series on FX. And he was somebody that I just enjoy being around every second, and was like, let's make him Watt's dad. And I always told Branson that I felt he reminded me of Alan Alda, and I always imagined that Watt's dad would have an Alan Alda quality. So anyway, so we got Branson, but then the two leads, Kimiko we had worked on Teenage Euthanasia,
Yeah.
but not too much other than that. And
Yeah.
then Camilla Papornia. So Kimiko plays Wendy and also Sally Piper, and then a ton of other extras.
Yeah, she's all over the place.
And Camilla Papornia plays Watt and also a bunch of other characters as well. Because it's a smallish show, we tend to have every actor play tons of characters.
That works. And then because of now remote and people have become much more used to recording things remotely, do people have their own setups now, or do you still go into a studio with them and direct them and through the glass and all that kind of stuff?
Are you asking for a friend?
Yeah.
Hey, so I have this really nice microphone.
So
I've got this really nice mic set up, and I was just wondering,
I
can be a letter. Hey, look at me. I'm a coffee cup. I could be whatever.
We could do a podcast. You could be an actual microphone.
I could be the microphone. Listen to me.
We should have I should say like beans, like podcast, like bean pods. Anyway,
bean pods doing a podcast. That would be
our podcast.
This is a super
but they would be like talking over each other because there's too many of them in the pod. Stop interrupting me. You're always talking over my line.
Over talking. Yes. I'm sorry. What was the question? Do people have their own setups? Well, it's a combination. I really didn't enjoy too much all of the long distance records that we had to do because of all the technical challenges, as I'm sure you've experienced, Marty.
You're totally beholden to people's Ethernet or Wi-Fi or individual computer, like all of a sudden just turning off, or it's nuts.
We had an actor, I won't mention the name, that we had to cancel a record because they couldn't figure out how to open the case that had the microphone in it, and we had to cancel. That was a bummer. So I'm looking forward to. I'm hoping in 2023 we could do more in-person records. I miss doing that. I like going to audio booths and recording studios is fun for me. But this is cool too, and the Zoom records they do the job, and we can generally get. I mean, obviously we got incredible performances from our actors, and that's what actors do.
I mean, Kimiko had her own kind of super pro setup in her own house. She does a lot of voice acting work, so she had a really nice setup. It kind of ranged from sending a kit out for someone to use to Zooming at an actual recording studio, or in Kimiko's case, having her own insanely professional setup in her own home. Yeah.
Her setup was incredible. I mean, she's she's also an incredible. They're all Kimiko. They're all great live action actors, but they also do a ton of animated stuff.
Yeah, Kimiko, we were like, Kimiko, this character actually sings. Can you try singing for us? And she was like, I'll give it a try, I guess. She did like an insanely like off the cuff, like I don't even
Yeah,
know
it
what you call
was.
that, like gliss of her vocal
Yeah,
cords.
yeah. Well, I mean, the embarrassing. Here's my talkward
You have a
Oh
worthy
yeah, here
moment.
it
Here's
comes.
my moment. Okay. Um, do you have those cringe worthy, like one of those sound effects? Cringe worthy.
hold on.
So I was like, Kamiko. I asked. Oh no, what's happening?
I don't know. I did.
Okay, that's great.
Does that work?
That's beautiful.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
So
All right, now we're done. That's enough. That's enough. It's from my Marty in the morning soundboard, so we don't have to. It's a different show.
Marty.
It's a different show.
So Kamiko is an incredibly talented voiceover artist, and like Katie said, we asked her to sing something in an episode, and her voice was absolutely stunning. It was incredible.
Like one
And
take.
afterwards, I was like, "Wow, Kamiko, you're a really good singer. Like, were you ever in a band, or have you sung at all?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, I was on Broadway in Waitress." She starred in the Broadway play Waitress and was literally a star of the cast, and I was ignorant of that. And I was fully embarrassed about that. So,
She's like, yeah, I've won a couple of Tonys, some Grammys, whatever. You haven't
Yes,
heard about
I
it.
was-
Let me do this animated voice for you for your little show.
humiliated. Yes. So there's my cringeworthy. Katie, what's your cringe story?
Oh my god. Like, don't make me say it.
Now I'm into
don't-
this.
I
I like the
feel like
idea of everyone telling these
I'll have to
cringe
like
stories.
like I just got out of dry January. I need to like shake cringeworthy stories loose with tequila. I don't know. I got the chance to write one of the outlines for when we go to Skytown to
Yeah.
Windy the Kite's home neighborhood. And the overwhelming note on my first outline was it felt way too much like a cult.
It's tricky. It's like when you're in a compound in the middle of nowhere, and
They're just
Yeah.
farmers.
They're all wearing the same bows or
just
They're
something,
just
and
farmers
they're
who also sell LSD
Yeah,
to get by.
yeah. I think there may have been a point we had there was a name like the Happiness Ranch or something like that. They were like, no, it's feeling a little weird.
they're all drinking this punch. I don't know. It
No,
seems
that's not.
strange.
I
It's
don't see what's
pure.
wrong with it.
Skytown is a beautiful, pure place.
Skytown. Is that like
Skytown.
Skytown? You guys are great with the jokes. There's just,
Skytown. Hopefully we're gonna go back there in season 2.
Yeah.
It's actually our version of Staten Island.
Yeah, it's the most friendly, welcoming version of Staten Island ever
Because
created.
it's where all the people that fly live. There's kites and balloons and paper airplanes, and I wanted to make a borough that could be like a cloud in the sky, and you take a ferry there, but the ferry is a blimp. So that's Skytown, and Skytown is a little more mellow than the intensity of City Island, teaching kids a little bit about the fact that all neighborhoods can be a little different. And if you grew up in one place, it doesn't mean it's just like the other place that someone else grew up, and that all places have their own charm. That was Skytown.
they're
That's-
all
I do-
doing like nitrous or something.
No,
Basically.
No,
But I do
it's
like,
helium. Helium.
it
They
does-
all have a higher pitch voice.
I do like there's a joke about Skytown where like Watt's like, wow, cloud trees, cloud houses, your neighborhood really went all in on clouds. That's like a perfect example of like my favorite kind of tone that the show hits, because
Yeah.
it's like kind of weirdly self-aware instead of like like, oh yeah, we just love it here, this is so much fun. It's a little bit
Yeah.
like adults, I feel like, can look at it and be like, yeah, they did. Like
yeah.
it's
Well, I
think-
self-aware is a tone we strive for.
It seems like the jokes are really dry and fast, but like
Yeah.
well-meaning and positive, but they're still
Yes.
jokes. And I kind of feel like going back to like the difference between the constraints of writing for adult and writing for kids is when you're given more parameters, you can be more creative.
Yeah,
because
sure.
because if you can do anything you want and you can be as dirty as you want, people are dirty sometimes for no reason, and it's like completely unnecessary, and they're just being shocking, and you're like, is that funny or is that just shocking? And then there's a lot of comedians that do the same thing, where it's like they get up there and they're just like, I'm anti this, and but they're just bad comics, that they're just like yelling and screaming, and they're just saying shocking things. But if you said you have to be clever and funny, and this is your box, like you have to do it within these parameters, talented people can thrive, and they can be like, okay, I can still be funny, like I can still be, without being dirty, I can still be absolutely hilarious, and I think this show does that because it doesn't feel like it's pandering. I feel like a lot of kids animation or kids things, they just seemed like dumbed down, or they seem like really slow. And really good kids shows, like kids are not slow. Kids are faster than we are. Like their brains are just firing off. Like they can absorb stuff and stuff that they don't get. They still think it's funny because they understand what a joke is. Like the formula of a joke is always the same, and like it's almost like natural to laugh because you feel like like, oh, that's funny. And then later on you get it more. Like you thought it was funny when it was this, and then you get a little older, you're like, oh, they're making fun of that.
Yeah.
Like when you go back, as old people as we are now, I'm going back and watching some stuff in the 80s, and I'm totally, I'm getting all these jokes I missed the first time around. You're like, oh God, that was really dirty. I can't believe my parents let me watch this movie. But I loved it back then, and I wasn't offended, but...
Well, I'm glad you see that with the tone, I saw, to bring up The Simpsons again, when The Simpsons came out, and like there was a ton of other shows that tried to, compete with The Simpsons, and most of them failed. I think maybe Bob's Burgers or Family Guy was the first one that actually was able to compete with The Simpsons. That took a decade. But so they asked Matt Groening, like, why do you think that The Simpsons has been successful and so many shows can't find, success as an animated comedy? And he said the tone. He said it's really hard to find the right tone for your comedy, and most shows can't find it, at least immediately, right? So I'm glad you see that tone with City Island as a tone of positivity, and I think that does come from the sincerity of the way we approach the show. I genuinely like these characters. I genuinely like this world. I genuinely have a positive outlook towards community. And I'm excited that we can make a show like that can encourage kids to learn about their community, to respect the people that are working around them, to want to collaborate. Like I genuinely feel good about that. I really, really, I'm excited about the opportunity to do that. There is absolutely no pandering going on. There's no sarcasm going on. And I feel like that's tangible. And I'm glad to hear you say that. I'm glad to hear people say that in general, because I think, you can tell when networks or producers don't respect their audience. I do think that you can see that. And, I worked at MTV, and, early on, I was this young, excited kid. I was like, I have all these ideas. I want to do all this stuff. And I remember a producer pulling me aside one time. Hey, I want to talk to you about something. And said, they go, see, here's your problem, Aaron. Here's what you have to understand. Our audience are garbage people, right? Our job is to feed them garbage because they are garbage, right? All these big ideas you have, they're not going to work. So just remember that these are garbage people that watch our shows.
So brutal.
That's a true story. I won't say who it was. Somebody said that to me, and shortly after that, I left, right? Because I was like, I can't live like that. You know what I mean? I can't live like that. And I think you'd be surprised how many networks have a low opinion of their own audience, and I think that's a real shame. And I would love for that
some
to
of
change.
These. Have you seen? I mean, the reality shows that they're putting out, because they're cheap to make and people will just eat them up. There's like it's called like MILF Town or something. It's like, and it's like old lady. It's like old moms and then like sexy sons, and they're like dating, and it's insane, and it's like a parody of what on 30 Rock forever ago.
All
it was
of these
MILF.
Sound like 30 Rock parodies.
They were 30 Rock. It was like MILF Island was a parody of a show that was like terrible, and now it's like on television, and it's worse.
Yeah, it's true.
It's all, I think that when we were writing it, and the entire time we're making City Island, we have this kind of like, we're very cognizant of when anything feels either mean-spirited or like it's talking down. It's like, because I mean, I think most people remember as a kid when an adult would lean down in your face and be like, "Hi, Marty, are you having fun today?" And it's just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like
it's so condescending, and people
yeah.
know it immediately. That actually is a good question, a good bridge here to our next comment. Is there a joke from a City Island episode that you wish you didn't have to cut?
Wow.
I can think of
don't
a
know.
lot from Town Hall, actually.
What do you got? I don't
'Cause
remember.
when so in Town Hall, basically, the town is gathering to decide what to do with an empty lot, and Watt wants to make a robot lab, and he pulls he pulls the sheet off of his robot that he brought as an example of his work, and it's awful. It's like falling apart and just a bad robot.
Mhm.
And there was a little kid that goes, "Mommy, that robot makes me sad," and the mom goes, "That's because it's not a very good robot." Like it's just like it's honestly all the
Yeah.
scripts were about 8 pages long, and for 3 minutes,
Yeah.
it's like we had
Had
to
to
cut
trim.
so much. There's so much that kind of had to make way for like. I mean, like it's good to hear that it's like the 3
It's
minutes
not a
feels
very good
jam-packed.
robot.
Yeah,
That was
Now, and also when I was a child, I remember there was a situation in elementary school where there was a bully. We had a bully situation when I was a
Wow.
kid, and in the recess there was a situation, and me and my friend Jimmy O'Connor, we got bullied and we were very upset. Jimmy O'Connor was more upset than I was, and I was like, I have a plan," and my plan was to build a robot, and I built
How old were you?
6th grade, maybe 5th
funny.
grade, 4th grade,
That's
5th
great.
grade.
29.
Yeah.
No,
Because I was the same child that I am now, which means I
Yeah.
would go to garage sales and I would get old television sets, old electronics, old junk, and I would wheel it with my red wagon back to my house. I would go to these. My parents were like, "God, why are you getting all this junk, Marty? We have junk to get rid of." And I would be like, "No, it's great. I'm building something." So I had all these black and white TVs, like the big heavy tube TVs,
Yeah.
and all this stuff. And I would be putting together like, stuff. Basically, what I have now is what I was doing when I was like 6. And I remember we built a robot, and it had like the body was like a tube television, and it had the stuff, and it had these
Wow.
legs, and it didn't work. It was a robot. But it looked a little scary, and we had this plan that we were going to have this robot.
Was
and
the idea that the robot would murder the bully?
Yeah.
nice.
Or it would intimidate the bully. It was going to fight our battles for us.
Imagining a RoboCop instantly shooting someone.
Yeah,
Like,
taking we're
I,
gonna take.
I really wish you would have brought that robot to school.
I wish I had taken a
I just
photo
was-
of it.
I love the idea that it was for your intimidation purposes.
Yeah.
Some little kid wheeling out some pile of junk.
Not for
Like,
violence,
haha.
just for
Now what do you say?
I
Look
know.
at this.
Not
Get ready
so
for this.
not so tough with my robo friend here with me. It gets 2 channels and it's very fuzzy.
Wow. Because I feel like if you would have had your other friend maybe get in it and attack him.
Yeah, that is something that I
That
would
would
have
be a fully
forced.
formed
I would
idea.
have forced Jimmy O'Connor to get into the robot because
Yeah.
he was sort of the friend where I would always test things out on Jimmy O'Connor, and he got put through all kinds of crap that I would always have these harebrained schemes, and then I would convince him to do it because I wouldn't do it. It was a horrible idea. But Jimmy O'Connor would be like, "I'll try that." Like we were building parachutes, like not safe
Yeah.
stuff, and he was
Right.
jumping off tree limbs. It was crazy.
God, I just heard it was some other, I think it might have been another podcast, so I'm stealing from it. But it's like when someone's telling you that you're being so brave to do something, it means they're
Yeah.
very scared for you.
It means I would never do that.
Right.
Better
I
you
have
than me,
such
man.
better judgment than you.
And
Um,
so, honestly, I could loop this back to City Island to say that, like, I like that Watt is the kind of kid that has harebrained schemes, right? But he's not annoying. You know what I mean? Because, like, with City Island, it was important to us that Watt would be this ambitious kid. He's all these ideas. He wants to do all this stuff. But that, like we mentioned earlier, it comes from a pure place. He just wants to either have fun or help out or, go on an adventure. And, it's finding the right zone for that. So he's not like a precocious kid. He's actually a likable, just fun kid. That's definitely the zone we try to find,
And it's important to learn about the world, right?
Yeah,
so it's
sure.
like, the world is out there. I feel like today's kids they're all on their phones. They're all very insular, I guess it is. Like they're
Yeah.
not out there in the world meeting people, like walking around the small town, like the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood influence. Like
Sure.
I wish my my nieces and nephews watched Mr. Rogers Neighborhood because it was incredibly impactful.
Yeah,
And like
sure.
kids today don't watch a show where there's just like a person who is really friendly and nice, and he's like taking you around his neighborhood to meet the people in the neighborhood. And the show, your show is it has that sort of feeling of this, like, let's go meet the guy at the airport, let's go meet the
Yeah,
guy at the
sure.
post office. Like, they're all our friends, they're all part of the neighborhood. Let's all be part of this neighborhood, like, society together. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's important, like that's like a good lesson, is to like be friendly to people and see what they do, and understand that everybody has like their own little jobs that they like to do, and everyone does their job and the whole world keeps working,
Well,
you know?
there's definitely like I mentioned Sesame Street a lot, and that's because it is like an important influence on the show. But you're right, Sesame Street, going around meeting these characters that all sort of are up to something in the town. Um, the Muppets, was a
Oh yeah,
pretty
Muppets definitely.
pretty simple
Richard
transition.
Scary, Busy Town,
I
like all
didn't
that kind
really,
of.
yeah, I didn't really even make much of a delineation between Sesame Street and the Muppets. I don't know at what point I started watching the Muppet Show, but I kind of thought they were like the same show. And especially because Kermit was on both.
Yeah,
But
they had some crossover. They had some
I think
crossover.
The Muppet Show, you definitely had this on Sesame Street, especially with the character like Grover, but like especially on the Muppet Show, the idea of optimistic people trying to do something often quite ridiculous with full sincerity, and falling on their face is very funny to me. And like,
Yeah.
it's like, and that kind of, I feel like there's a natural transition from like Sesame Street to the Muppet Show to like Christopher Guest movies, because I love Christopher Guest movies, because there's all these people that really that are inept but are sure they're doing something hugely important. You know what I mean? Whether it's like putting on a play or at a dog show, they're all like really sincere, or Spinal Tap. They're so sure that they're the most important band of all time. So the fact that they're ridiculous is all the more hilarious, you know? So with City Island, it's the same thing. It's like everyone has the purest of intentions, you know what I mean? In everything they do, so that when they stumble, it's funny. And it's also a learning experience.
There's also kind of this like vibe of that I it's interesting because with the rise of social media and like the concept of something going viral and being like seen all around the world,
Mm,
there's or like even by a large audience, let's say, there's this kind of like devaluing of local efforts that
mm,
has kind of occurred. And I like the idea that in City Island, like those things that Watt wants to do with his friends matter just as much as something that is like a more global audience level thing, like a
mm.
play or an effort that he is doing in his neighborhood with just as few friends, like matters just as much because the people in your life will still see it and be affected by it. It's just like a nice kind of reminder that like, well, sometimes it's okay if I just do something that my friends care about.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be broadcast to the world. It could just be the people on my block. Like, it makes
Right.
it like I planted a tree and it makes that block look nicer.
Mm,
Someone in wherever on Instagram doesn't care about my tree probably, but the guy who lives right there is going to say like, "Hey, that really brightened my day. I'm so glad you did that gardening." Like
yeah.
stuff like that. Like, it's like
It's
local.
It's funny too, because like, so most of the characters on our show, let's say our main characters of the show, are all like 8 years old, right? That's like how old Watt is and Wendy. So it's a nice sweet spot. I've actually never thought about this before, but it's a nice sweet spot where they really don't have smartphones yet, right? Kids that age, like they shouldn't, at least I don't know, but like I don't think they do generally have smartphones. So it's a nice excuse for us to not have to use that as a storytelling device,
Yeah.
and it's like Katie and I watch a lot of horror movies, and it's funny how most horror movies now have to bend backwards to find a way to explain why someone's cell phone isn't working, because
Yeah.
it's the easy solution to every problem. It's like, oh, I'm trapped in this cabin. Oh no, we have no cell service. I guess we can't leave.
One of my
So
favorite YouTube compilations is like a 10-minute long video of people just going, "My battery's dead. My battery's dead. My battery's dead. My cell service is out. I don't get signal here. I don't get signal here."
so like, it's true, but we're in this zone right now where I think there's enough people that it's a little off topic, but like there's enough people like Gen Xers to boomers that remember the time before there was cell phones, and they're the ones that are still sort of making a lot of these shows and movies. So they don't have, so the actual presence of having a smartphone is not as integrated into storytelling. You're seeing it in some newer stuff. But I think at some point, I think in 20 years, it'll be fully integrated into storytelling. But right now,
Oh
we're still in this
yeah.
kind of zone where like, they have to excuse away cell phones. But all that being said, we do a show where the kids don't have to be on their phone all the time. So
great.
it's true they engage with the world a little more than they may have if they were like 14 or something, you know.
When they completely stop engaging at all
That's the
currently,
difference.
which is totally sad. I mean, and the shows that do use text messaging and things
Yeah.
in the shows, they
Yeah.
put the text messages on the screen, and I'm like,
know.
oh God, I can't even see. What does that say? And I have to
I
pause
don't
it,
know if I've
and
seen
I'm
that
like,
used well yet.
and it hasn't. And they don't incorporate the text messages or text on the screen in the closed captioning.
Oh, really?
So it's like I have no idea what this is. Like this was made by someone who's like 24, and I'm like, I can't see it. It's a
I know.
shame.
There'll be a good way to do it eventually. We'll find like we'll break out of the
We'll
like
figure it out.
screen
Somebody
on
will
screen.
crack it.
Honestly, as like I can handle it when it's on screen as long as the texting is like realistic. When it's like fully formed sentences with perfect punctuation, I'm like a real person, a real 14-year-old did not write that.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, when it uses all the different slang, but then you get into a situation when we have no idea what that means.
Yeah.
And I'm like I'm just figuring out what a couple of things mean. I'm like, oh, do people actually type that?
Someday
that's
text on
terrible.
screen will be on fleek.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So what were your two favorite cartoons growing up? Katie, what was your favorite cartoon growing up?
Ooh. When I was really little, Puff the Magic Dragon was pretty clutch for me. When I was like City Island watching age, I think. And then honestly, a little bit older, I keep gravitating back towards Rocko's Modern Life, kind of again because it was funny. Like rewatching it, there are funny jokes on Rocko's Modern Life. I was super into it, and it kind of pushed like kids animation into this like weird place that I think is a little scary now for most animated shows for kids, which like going back to the whole like you don't want to like rely on shock to be comedic.
Mm-hmm.
I think that maybe kids' version of shock is just being weird, which is still pretty fun.
That's interesting.
I used to love remember Liquid Television on MTV?
Sure.
Man, like Eon Flux. Like that was some cool stuff.
Really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like I just remember, watching weird stuff like that as a kid is just fun. When you're just sitting in front of the TV, like, oh my god, I didn't want to be like this. Like,
Liquid Television was when I was in high school, and that was definitely like a really big deal. And what I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast about the idea of like having these influences in like underground comics, that opened me up. And I know, Marty, you're in the comics world too. Like that opened me up to a lot of like really cool New York cartoonists that I never would have seen. People like Mark Beyer, Charles Burns had a Dog Boy was on Liquid Television. Seeing Mike Judge for the first time with Beavis and Butthead, Eon Flux. So anyway, I was seeing all these really cool underground cartoonists for the first time, and like, how would I have ever seen that growing up in Delaware? So that was a big deal. But then, so that was more high school time, and that's when I started getting like underground cartoon stuff. And then, but yeah, my early days I think was pretty standard. I mean, it was like I said, Sesame Street was a big deal. Looney Tunes were a huge deal for me, like totally mind-blowing, life-changing experience watching Looney Tunes cartoons over and over and over again. I mean, it's just like that went into my DNA, and it will always be there. Like whenever I approach any cartoon, I always am coming from a place from Looney Tunes. But then I also really like comics a lot. I was you can ask Adam. Adam's my brother, a mutual friend of me and Marty, and I was really into Garfield. Like heavily.
Oh yeah, Garfield, one of my favorites. One of my favorites.
Devotedly into Garfield.
All those books.
I would those books that were like
the long books. Yeah,
horizontal books. I had all of them, and I would even like the comics that would come out had newer strips than were in the books because it took whatever it was a year for them to put them in the books. So I would cut them out, and I made my own scrapbook of my favorite Garfield comics. I was obsessed with Garfield, but then Garfield was like a gateway drug to me to the Far Side, and Far Side was a big deal for me as well.
Yeah,
that there was a sort of an elevation of surrealism to the Far Side that definitely defined a lot of the rest of my life.
I think I went from Garfield to Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah. Oh, Calvin and Hobbes.
And then Calvin and Hobbes had this sort of just like this soul of just like introspection.
Poignant. It's like a very poignant show.
So poignant. And Garfield was so funny. Garfield was so mean, but so funny. So mean to Odie. Oh, God, they were so mean to Odie. So mean to John Arbuckle.
Nermal.
God, everyone got it.
Yeah. I think, It's funny, Katie. I think about that after. I didn't think about it while we were making it, but I think Calvin is a very good reference for Watt.
Yeah.
I think they're very similar types of characters as far as like exuberant, excited characters that there's a likability to them. You know what I mean? And
now, Calvin also would constantly be trying to sell his father's car to randomly make money. So he was also devious.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want someone who's too perfect too, though. It's kind of fun to have a little bit of an edge to it. And I think the way those characters absorb information also informs the kind of person they are, where like they're like, oh, cool, I didn't know that. As opposed to like, well, that sounds dumb, I didn't think that. So like, it's kind of being open to like absorbing this new information when you not making a big deal of when you were mistaken.
Right.
It should all be so good.
I wonder if because Calvin and Hobbes was never animated, if that's why it still has such a like people have such an intimate relationship with that. You know what I mean? Because when people talk about Calvin and Hobbes, like, oh, Calvin and Hobbes. You know what I mean? It's like it's very personal, because it's something about like just reading it and like you've never seen it on a big screen, which
it's
kind
something
of
about really resisted. Making it into an animated or like live action.
He was just out there in the woods living like a hermit. Like he just like cut himself off of everything.
Yeah.
And there's something about Calvin and Hobbes books that there was like an ongoing storyline a bit, like things were recurring and things would come back and things would kind of like have an arc to them more so than like a Garfield. Like Garfield, like he hated Mondays, he hated his lasagna, but they didn't really have that much character development. It was more just like, this is what you get.
Garfield.
Yes.
Another thing that Kevin Hobbes did that I think was influential for me was he played with genre every now and then. Like, they have those episodes where he was like a film noir detective.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And like playing with genre is something we did in City Island. I love to do all the time. This is our horror episode, or this is our thriller, or this one's like a rom-com, like whatever. Playing with those devices, like you pointed out the post office episode, we turned it into like a Billy Wilder, screwball comedy. So playing with genre is really fun, and that might have been the first place I saw it was in Calvin and Hobbes. It was like, oh, this is one cartoon, but they're kind of pretending to be a different cartoon,
Yes.
And then for me, that like exploded when I saw Roger Rabbit. When I got to see Roger Rabbit, and then it was like, oh, now we're like taking all these things and all these different types of characters and mixing them up and seeing what happens when you combine them or clash them, and styles and tones. And that was a big deal for me when I saw Roger Rabbit as well.
I have I think you guys can hear this. I hope you can hear this. I'm going to play the theme song to City Island because it's so good. And tell me about who did the theme song.
Should I do it before or after you play it?
I'm going to play it. Let's see if it works.
Okay.
Everybody needs a friendly helper. Everybody needs a home for shelter. Everybody needs a helping hand through sunny days or nasty weather. If you find that you've got some problems, come along and we'll help you solve them. Soon you see that things get so much better when we work together. Yeah, it's alright. And now the future's looking bright. So we say, yeah, we'll make it right on City Island.
So this is the incredible musician Tunde Adebimpe, who people would know as the lead singer of TV on the Radio.
That's right,
he's also a prolific actor as well. I met Tunde because we're about the same age, and we actually worked at MTV together. A fun fact that people don't know about Tunde, maybe it's a secret I shouldn't be discussing, but he was an animator. He is a trained animator, and we met because I was working on the show Daria, and he was animating the show Celebrity Deathmatch. He is stop motion animator.
Oh, stop motion. God, that's
yeah. No, I remember I've never done it, and I would go over and see those, just like moving a thing at like 1 millimeter at a time. It's tricky. But so we met there, got along, and around the same year, 1999, he said, I'm thinking of leaving MTV. And I said, I'm thinking of leaving MTV. I'm thinking of starting my own studio. And he said, oh, that's funny. I'm thinking of focusing on my band. And I remember thinking, well, good luck with all that. And I'm sure he was thinking, good luck with all that about me. And we both did our different things. And within, I believe, 2 years, he was a world famous rock star. And I was a struggling animator in Dumbo. So we had very different career paths. And I was always just absolutely in love with his music. And around when City Island came about, early on, I think during the pilot, I reached out to him and to see if he was interested, and he was super into the show. And we obviously have similar influences, so he liked the style, and he was like, I would love to do this. So he created the theme song that hopefully the viewers and listeners will have just heard.
It's catchy. It's catchy.
Yeah, it's incredible. He's brilliant. So he made the theme song for the pilot, and he made a few different scores and sound beds for us. And then once we got to series, he did original compositions for almost every episode, which is
that's amazing.
So thrilling and so rare in a kids show to have this kind of composition happening. So composition, that kind of music on a show is, I think, pretty awesome.
Well, thank you so much. I don't want to take up any more of your time because you guys are busy, and I know you have lots of things to do. But thank you for stopping in on Talkward. And if people want to follow you guys online, I know that you just relaunched augenblickstudios.com.
Yeah.
Which looks amazing and has all of your shows and has little clips of everything and kind of a history of everything you guys have done. And if people want to follow you, you're at Aaron Augenblick?
Yes. At Aaron Augenblick. I think I am. Definitely go to augenblickstudios.com. That's kind of the hub. You can find Future Brain through there. You can find all of our animations. And I highly recommend our Instagram. If you're interested in City Island, it's at City Island PBS. So definitely check that out. It's on Facebook as well. And that's a good place to see. We're constantly posting clips from the show, news, process art. So definitely check out City Island PBS.
All right. And thank you, Katie. Katie, can people follow you? Do you have a website you want to promote?
If you go to Instagram, I'm Katie Wendt Art. So Wendt like George Wendt with the silent D.
Wendt like George Wendt. That's a great.
No relation.
No relation. Oh, well.
I wish.
I wish. Norm. All right, guys.
So much fun.
Thank you so much for coming by. All right. I will see you all soon. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Talkward. Please subscribe, follow us, and visit weeklyhumorist.com.